Risking love. It's something that we Unitarian Universalists are pretty good at. Risk in general, though, is hard. And one of the things that I look at frequently used to be over my coffee maker, but then I decided to go caffeine-free. So now it is just over my dishes. It's a card with a quote from Anais Nin. And these are the words: "Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage." I saw this card while I was preparing to move across the country and separate from my husband. I hid this card away in a journal, afraid that if my then husband saw the card, he would know exactly what was in my heart. And that was too terrifying. The risk that I was taking was the biggest risk that I'd ever taken in my life. And those words gave me hope and courage. And in the 6 years since I found that card, they have changed, and they mean so many different things to me. And yet, courage is what has kept my life open to love and to many other things. So this is going to be the refrain of my time with you today. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. And I'm going to ask you to think about what that means for your lives as individuals and as part of a congregation that risks love. So, when people typically think about risking love, at least if they're like me, they might think about a romantic relationship. To me, that's besides the point. What I'm talking about here is our first principle: to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. To me, that takes a huge amount of love and a huge amount of risk. Think about it. Everyone, meaning that you're going to love everyone. I wasn't trying to be bossy. But it means affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That means the person who stole your seat on the bus, the person who took your promotion or even took your job, the person who broke your heart, either 30 years ago or last week, the person who voted differently than you, the person who has done things that we know are evil and has been convicted of them in a court of law. Even risking loving someone who has committed genocide. How can we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person? And yet, our first principle calls us to this. As a reminder, our principles are aspirations. They call us to be our best selves. And by the nature of aspirations, there is a gap between where we are today and where we aspire to be, who we aspire to be. So when I talk about loving people that we don't agree with, affirming their inherent worth and dignity, please let me be clear. That does not mean supporting their actions. That does not mean leaving ourselves open to harm. We can affirm and promote a person's dignity while still protecting ourselves and protecting others whom we love and other things that we love, such as blue skies and this big boat, this big earth that has been so gracious to us as strangers. Believing in the inherent worth and dignity of every person means that we believe somewhere inside every person there is some kernel of goodness. For some, they believe that this is a kernel of God, a kernel of divinity. Regardless of what we name this goodness, it is a belief that it exists. No one is worth leaving behind. No one is unsavable. Once again, this can seem like a great idea in principle. For me, it's why I'm a Unitarian Universalist. And it's why I am becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister. However, I have to admit, when I think of some specific names, both in my personal life and in the public arena, it seems very hard to do. So I'm going to remind you of that quote that we started with. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. To be a community of risk, to be a community that risks loving, we must ask who we love and be willing to expand that circle of love to more people, to all people. Helen Keller, many of us know, was a woman who defied logic and history and learned how to communicate even though she was deaf and blind. She says that no pessimist ever discovered the secrets of the stars or sailed to an uncharted land or opened a new heaven to the human spirit. Now, I do not want to slander pessimists because I myself am a recovering pessimist. But pessimists might have a hard time believing that there is goodness in Hitler or that there was goodness in Hitler. Even optimists might have a very difficult time believing that. And so it takes courage to open our hearts to individuals who continue to try to harm us and people that we love. It takes great courage. And yet, the people that we lift up in this congregation, individuals like Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and a newer leader, William Barber II. These are all individuals who believe that love is the only way through division. I was looking for a good quotation from Martin Luther King Jr., and the one that I kept on finding was that, I'm going to paraphrase, that the only way to turn an enemy into a friend is through love. And I didn't end up copying it because I thought to myself, like, I don't know if I want to become friends with people like that. And yet, most likely I am somebody like that to them too. This does not mean that we stop protesting. This does not mean that we stop looking for ways to protect people and making them happen. This certainly does not mean that we become silent. This means that we know that we have to do all of that hard work, whether in the public square or in our own personal lives. And maybe we need to do something else too. Maybe we need to think about listening to other people's pain and holding them in a place of love. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. We say that we have a very big tent and that all are welcome here. And of course, we mean that with incredibly good intentions. And risking love, still really hard. Is there someone in your personal life that has hurt you, that you could think about loving them? You don't have to take any action besides allowing yourself to soften. Just as we pray that others' hearts will soften towards us and the people that we love, can our hearts soften to the person in our life that we are the maddest at, or we think the least of? Can we believe that there is a kernel of God, goodness, divinity, pineapple salsa, whatever you want to call it? Can we believe that that is in every person? And can we slowly start to open our hearts and soften our hearts to the other? If we can actually be in conversation with some of these individuals, we might see that we have things in common. They do not, They do not justify the actions that we disagree with. However, we can see that there is humanity and divinity in both of us. We can start to see and listen. My way typically to deal with this has been to not talk about the things that I disagree with, to just know that those are issues that we cannot talk about, and if I'm going to maintain the relationship, I just won't talk about those things. It allowed me to be a vegetarian touring a gyros factory because I didn't feel the need to tell them that I was a vegetarian. I used to eat meat, so I would live in that moment. It's funny when we talk about something like that, but yet one of my dearest friends, I never talked with her about sex education. And I never talked with her about abortion. And I didn't talk with her about women's rights because I loved her and I didn't want to dislike her. And yet, when I opened myself up to her and talked with her, I realized that some of these things we actually didn't disagree on. And our relationship was able to open in a way that it never would have been able to if I would have unfriended her when she posted something in favor of military action in the Gulf. Or if I would have kept my conversations on our children because we could agree about how much we loved our children. Risking love is hard work, and it will not always go that way. Sometimes we will have conversations with individuals, and the things that we think we disagree on, we actually disagree on. We don't get a fairy tale ending. We just continue to be in relationship with each other. We continue to be on this planet together. Because we, as the seventh principle tells us, we are connected, whether we want to be or not. We are connected to the earth, and we are connected to the people who do harm. So this next week, I'm going to ask you to think about taking another movement towards love, towards risk. And there are many different ways that you can do it. You could think about a person who has hurt you and try to just do some breathing. Feel your body unclench. You could, if you're already at that point, you could think about connecting with someone that you haven't connected with in a long time because of differences. Once again, if that feels too hard, you can just think about who that person is. I am not going to be checking up after you to see that you've done this assignment by next Sunday, which is April 2nd. It just is a movement. And any movement that takes us to love, takes us closer to love, allows us to expand our lives and those of everyone around us. think about what you can do as an individual. And after you have sat with that for a while, send me an email and let me know what you would like to do as a community. How has this experience been for you? I want to know about it. And if you don't want to share, that's okay too. There are small movements. When we think of risk, we often think of big jumps out of planes, moves across the country in fear or in pain. Risk can be something as small as forcing yourself to smile when you think of somebody's name. I believe in you, and I believe in this community. And I'm so happy that you all took the risk to make this place your home. Life expands or shrinks in proportion to one's courage. May you be courageous.